Morning, everyone. So as mentioned by Lei, I'm Bong Relian. I'm the collaboration sales specialist. Um, and really, what we wanted to discuss here was how remote work is being shaped or is reshaping the workplace that we're in, right? So we all know um, that because of COVID, diba, we were all forced to work from home. And so a lot of businesses were actually very quick and very resilient in the sense that in a very short amount of time, we've actually moved a lot of workforces from being 100% office-based to close to 98% work from home. Um, so as mentioned, diba, everyone is actually doing a lot of stuff at home. I'd like to think a lot of you are using Webex, but we're also naman cognizant of the fact diba, that you're actually also, there are a lot of other tools also that are in the market diba, for us to help meet the demands of working from home. So a lot of it has to be done. In the last 2 months, there has been a lot of virtual meetings that have happened. Diba? And so from what you see on the screen, this is Webex. We've been heavily promoting this the past 3 months since March. And we actually have, to date, we've provisioned around 1,000 enterprise trials. And we have around, in the Philippines alone, and around close to 10,000 free Webex sign-ups since April. So for your personal Webex accounts. But globally, we're still number one with around 500 plus million users. So we've held this position even before COVID. And so during this time, our usage also spiked, and we're currently at more than 500 million users to date. The other thing that we wanted to highlight here was this whole experiment of COVID also made us notice diba, that whatever your apprehensions were with cloud diba, and with working from home, a lot of those were dispelled diba, when we actually had to do it. Diba? So COVID actually launched the biggest work from home experiment and the biggest digital transformation initiative for a lot of organizations. And so what we noticed here was that actually a lot of companies noticed was that remote work was actually very productive. Diba? There was less time for inter-office chatter. Diba? There was actually more, we found ways to squeeze in more hours within the day to be actually having meetings because we didn't have to commute. We didn't have a lot of coffee breaks. Diba? You can find, I don't know for some of you, but for myself, for example, early on, I've had back-to-back meetings, diba? And it was very, very productive, but also very, very stressful. And so much so that a lot of companies have actually looked at thinking of this as a more permanent setup. Diba? So you hear Twitter telling their employees you can work from home forever. Just recently, with one of our partners, our global partners, announced that they're offering work from home for all of their employees as an option. Diba? So really, this whole work from home experiment led to a lot of eureka moments for the organization, and really it changed the way we actually do our work. But when we did a survey, so this was actually done by Engage Rocket. They did a survey asking the employees, is this something that you want? And what we found out was that really, although they've appreciated work from home, they didn't want it to be a permanent setup. Diba? So a lot of these employees were looking at, they valued flexibility, but not really a full remote office setup. So if you look at the graph, 3/4 said that they still want their regular work at the office. Half of them want to do it at home. 10% do not actually want to work from home, and so on. So whereas it was a very productive time, as an employer. For the employees, it's really also taking into consideration that there was a lot of stress that also happened when work from home was forced on us. And so what we're seeing is that as companies start to open up, or as the quarantine start to loosen, we're also seeing a lot of move, on how then does it redefine the future workplace. And so with that, we're actually seeing, that from where we are today, or a few weeks ago, wherein everyone was working from home, we're actually seeing a lot of companies starting to reopen their offices, but not in a full capacity. And a lot of it is because of the restrictions set by GCQ and by IATF. But there is still a large portion of that discussion wherein some people are actually having debates on whether or not the office will ever be 100% full. So, for example, Cisco Philippines, we don't have a return to office date yet. And a lot of it is because we're we have the tools, but we're using Webex. We have video conferencing. Has always been ingrained in the way we do our business, and so because we weren't as disrupted, we're also not in a hurry to actually reopen the offices. So there's no definite date for us to reopen our SM Aura office, for example. I know there's only one employee who's actually allowed to go back. Everyone else, if we swipe in, will not even get access into the office yet. But as we move forward, and as this becomes a more permanent setup, we're actually realizing that remote work is not just about having meetings. So on the one end, it's about collaboration. So when we say collaboration, it's the ability for us to actually work together. And so what we've seen in the past few months or weeks is not just that we have online meetings, but we have a lot of chat as well, and a lot of co-sharing of documents. Similarly, we've had a lot of a spike in customers asking us to help them in their events. So what you've noticed is that we've had less events in actual physical venues, and a lot of these events have happened virtually. To date, we've supported a lot of banks in their annual shareholders meetings, for example. We've had doctors have their medical conferences over Webex, and even schools having their education summit. And this seems to be the trend, and this will actually continue to happen for the remainder of the year at least. So most of our marketing budgets have moved to virtual, and we're not looking at having a physical event anytime soon. Similarly, it's, as mentioned, it's not just about meetings, but it's also about how do you continue to work despite being separated. And so this is about active co-creation. And so you've seen that there are a lot of discussions on whiteboarding, on the ability for us to annotate, and the ability for us to actually share files and discuss and actually edit across, similar to the way we were able to do that when we were face-to-face. And so on this meeting, for example, I can actually annotate on this meeting and say that this is a person doing a whiteboard, this is actually a desk pro, and so on. And I can actually also allow the audience, people that I meet with, to also cross-annotate with me, and have that discussion. So whereas before, we actually did a lot of this brainstorming or these brainstorming sessions inside the conference room, we're actually seeing that this happens now virtually. And so it's imperative that whatever tools we have allow us to do this whiteboarding and this ideation, this co-editing function across the cloud and across cross borders. The other thing we've noticed, and this is more to the stress, is that collaboration also has to be inclusive, meaning that since we've been so away from the office and so away from our office mates, the simple hellos and the simple quick chats, we've seen a lot of spike in that as well as yung mga team building efforts. So all of this is still an important part in the way we build our culture. And so we want to make sure that this happens pa din, diba? Because it's very important for us to build up that morale as we continue to work. And yet, no, what we're seeing now as the quarantines loosen up is that this situation is going to change, diba? In the sense that it's not just work from home now. We're actually seeing hybrid offices. And so you have to have a solution that works from home, works in the as on the go, as well as in the office. So on the go, we wanted to highlight that the solutions that we have actually work on any device. So when we say any device, it can be an Apple iPhone, it can be an Android smartphone, it can be tablets, Windows, and Mac. So it has to allow you to actually still be connected to your office, regardless of where you're in or where you're actually doing your work. And then finally, as mentioned, the way COVID has affected us has actually also affected the way we view the workspace. So there is a comment that work is no longer a place I report to, but it's actually the output of what I do. And so regardless of where we are, we have to be able to do our work. And so the offices that used to be like this, where it's very full, and we see everyone reporting to work every day, we've actually seen that offices are empty. So this is actually our Singapore office. And if you notice, there's not that many people going to work. But as we open, we have to make sure that we still are able to do the functions and to do it safely. So what we were able to do in the office, now we should be able to do across multiple areas. So some of them will be in the office, but a lot of your workers now, half of them will probably still be at home. And so what we wanted to highlight here was that when you start to rethink reopening your office, you also have to look at how do I create that space so that allows me to work with people who are in the office at 50% capacity, and still contact the people who are either at home or in the field. And so again, video becomes a crucial element here. And so when we say video, we're not only just talking about, for example, the Webex platform that allows us to communicate over our IP, our laptops and our mobile phones, but also your video endpoint infrastructure that you already have in your offices or that you planned to have initially. So we still have that use case for the meeting rooms, but to have their video conferencing solutions. But these have to now connect not just to other video endpoints, but also to the people who are actually working from home. And so that makes the platform equally important. Similarly, we mentioned that you can do active collaboration on Webex. It has to also translate into the video endpoint. So that when you're inside your meeting room, inside the office, you should still be able to participate with the people outside and still do your whiteboarding. So what you see on this screen, for example, is our Webex board. So our Webex board is an integrated video conferencing solution plus a whiteboard. So we can actually share and whiteboard across on the Webex board, but it goes across also to everyone inside the Webex meeting. And so everyone can actually see and do this brainstorming session, for example, your planning session, and participate in that active discussion. So again, another view, regardless of the device that you're using. So you see the Webex board on the far left. You see a typical endpoint inside the middle, so with an iPad that's actually sharing the screen, or a Desk Pro. And you should be able to whiteboard regardless of the device that you're using. Similarly, we have to rethink the way we use our spaces. So whereas before we had a lot of common areas and then meeting rooms, we now have to see, how do I make use of the space, and make sure that we don't crowd it too much. And so we're going to see a lot of personal devices. So these are, for example, the Desk Pro for our executives. So a lot of personal endpoints that allow us to have these sessions in the comfort of the executive offices, but also to have to look at smaller coffee rooms or quiet rooms and make that video enabled as well, diba? So that I can actually do a personal meeting. Similarly, how do you enforce, for example, spacing, diba? Social distancing inside your meeting rooms. And so what we wanted to highlight here is that when we start planning this out, diba, that the technology has to also follow. And so what you'll notice here is that within the Webex devices or our room devices, whether it's the Desk Pro, the Room Kit, or even the Room 70s or the dedicated devices, we actually do a people count. So the cameras natively can actually count the number of people in the room, and it can now alert you if, for example, we set the limit for the room has to be only 3. It can now alert you if there are more than 3 people inside the room. Diba? So as you know, diba, because of social distancing, we have to make sure, diba, that even as I use a meeting room that used to seat 10, we have to now cut that down to 30%. Diba? And so we can use the video endpoints and the cameras to actually help us also notify us if there are people who have already abused the social distancing norms. Some other things that we wanted to highlight, because our Webex devices allow us to actually control it via voice, we can actually book rooms and also use the rooms or reserve the rooms without touching anything. So if you notice here, I can actually just talk to Webex and ask Webex to find, or I can look at my own laptop, and find a room to book. This room, for example, is actually free because I have Webex Teams in my phone. Once I step in, I can actually book it either via Outlook, or I can configure it so that if I step into that free room, I can book it from my Webex Teams app. And so then it locks the room. It says that it's already booked, and it will update all of the calendars also. And then I can just release the room after. Similarly, I can actually reserve the room via the Room Kit just by talking to the endpoint. So I can actually say, okay, Webex, reserve this room for this time. And then it will reserve the room if it's free, and it will update all of the calendars accordingly also, so that everyone knows that the room is now reserved. Similarly, I can use the same to extend the meeting if I'm going to go beyond, for example, the hour. So I can actually say, okay, Webex, please extend the meeting by another 30 minutes. And then it will reserve the room again. The other thing we wanted to highlight is that we can actually share, we can pair our devices to the endpoint. So whether it's a Desk Pro or even the Room Kit. And when we say pair, we can actually then bring our own laptop, initiate the call from our laptop, so we're not touching the endpoint, because a lot of people are now very sensitive about touching anything. So because my laptop is my own personal device, and I'm the only one using it, I can actually just go inside the room and from the laptop initiate the call, and it will wirelessly pair with the endpoint inside the room, and then start the call from that endpoint. So I don't have to touch the panel of the endpoint anymore. I can also share my screen from my laptop into the endpoint without using an HDMI cable or without actually using Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So similarly, I can actually, if I have with my Webex Teams, when I enter the meeting room and I have a Webex device, if I'm the only one inside the room, the device already recognizes me, and it will ask me if there's a scheduled meeting already. It can ask me if I already want to start that meeting. So in this instance, for example, this user experience review, which is reserved by Jane, was scheduled for 10 to 11. Jane steps into that meeting room at 10 o'clock. Webex already pairs Jane's device to this device inside the room. And so I know that it's Jane, and then I know there's a meeting scheduled at 11 by Jane. So I can actually so the device will just ask Jane if you want to join the meeting already. Similarly, you can use Webex to call people in your directory. So you can say, okay, Webex, call Vanessa. And if there are several Vanessas in your office, it will intelligently identify the Vanessa that you normally contact as the first option that will come out. And then ask you, is it going to be Vanessa Cruz, for example? And if it is, then just say yes, and then it will already call Vanessa without touching the device. Other things we've been doing because of this reopening is that we're also looking at how do you use these devices to actually make it safe for your visitors to come in as well. And so this is actually our Singapore office. This is what's happening now. So our receptionist is actually still working from home. So what we did was we placed a video endpoint at the reception. So as you can see, it also works as a digital signage. So you have to scan the QR code, type in your health declaration on that app, and then it will be submitted to our receptionist. And then you can actually speak to the lobby ambassador. She will welcome you from her home, ask you who you're going to visit, and then she will create the visitor label, and that will be printed on the printer at the side. So what we're doing here is we're actually also making sure that you have a way for you to meet with the people inside the office without actually exposing yourself to unnecessary additional visitors or additional people. So you don't have to meet physically the receptionist. She can still badge you in. And so you're now limiting your exposure in our office to the person lang that you have to be. And all of this works because it works on the Cisco Webex platform. So we have a single app and also a single management pane. So when I say a single pane of glass, our control hub actually allows you to manage not just the Webex Teams and Webex Meetings users, but also all of the video endpoints, your telephony solution, even the contact center solution of Cisco is actually all inside the Webex Control Hub. And so with that, we can actually define workspaces inside, so your different meeting rooms, and then define how many people. So it's right here. I can define how many people are supposed to be in that space, and I can actually see as well how many occupants are in the space. So if I define the space to only have to be a one-person room, I can check if that room has actually just one occupant. So what we're doing here is we wanted to show you that with Webex, and not just the meetings platform, but the entire Webex platform, we want to make sure that we have the best tool for the job and the workspaces to go with it. So I assume most of you are familiar now that this is Webex, the platform that we're using right now, but this is also Webex, our telephony system, our headsets, our video endpoints. So it's not just the meetings platform, it's our chat platform as well as our IP telephony and then our video endpoints. And so within the entire Webex platform, it allows you then to do your work, whether it's remote or it's in the office. You can actually live your entire work day within Webex. So just like Jody and myself, we're actually primarily on Webex Teams, and so a lot of our conversations happen there. And allow me to just show you my Webex Teams so that you'll see it as well. Hold on. So I'm now sharing my entire screen, and then, so this is, for example, my Webex Teams, and what you'll notice here is if I had a meeting scheduled, it would come out here, and actually I know if I can join that. But all of my chats are here as well, and so a lot of the discussions actually happen here. I can share my content, so I can share all of my files to the people I meet with. I can schedule additional meetings. I can do whiteboardings here in the groups so that I can have that brainstorming session. And the one thing, well, two things that are nice about Webex Teams. One is that this is end-to-end encrypted. And then number two, it allows me an easy way for me to communicate with customers as well. So it's not just a tool for internal communications, but it's also a tool for me to actually chat with people outside of my organization and it doesn't require me to create a guest account for them in my organization. So if my customer or my partner, my reseller also uses Webex Teams, I can actually create a Webex Teams space very easily with external participants. Because what we noted was that in Cisco, when we were doing our chats and doing our collaboration, only 20% of our spaces or the spaces we use were actually all internal Cisco. A lot of our communication actually happens with our suppliers, with our customers, with our resellers. And so we felt that whatever collaboration tool you had should actually emulate the way you do your work, which is actually in discussions with a lot of people and not just people inside your company. And so that's what we envisioned when we created Webex Teams, and that's what we're doing now. It's our one-stop place for us to do our meetings, our chat, even calling. So I can actually do a dial out into a PSTN from Webex calling, which is actually in my Webex Teams app. So it's your single app to connect your team. So whether it's meetings, messaging, or calling, and then it's very easy to join. So there's a green button for you to join. You just click that and you're inside your room already. Webex Meetings is very easy to use, so there are a lot of controls. If you want to go into in-depth on Webex Meetings, you can schedule that with Phil Data as well, your partner. The other thing we've added now is we've added a lot of AI into Webex. So we've placed a Webex assistant who can actually do closed captioning, as well as take notes and do online transcriptioning. So when it does its transcription, it's also smart enough to take note of what you say. So if you say, for example, okay, Webex, note the following, or this is an action item, it will highlight that in the transcript so that when I do my minutes of the meeting later, I can just send the action items or send the highlights so that I don't have to send the entire transcript to everyone in that meeting. So again, this is our Teams client is a messaging solution. It allows us to securely share and work together on files. We also have our own calling solution in the cloud. So if you're looking at one of the use cases we noted since COVID started is that if you think about it, when we started our quarantine, a lot of us, the first thing we thought of was how do you do your meetings? And so that's why you see people flock to Webex, people flock to other solutions, the one with the letter Z, the one with the letter M, the one with the letter G. So, and it was all about meetings. But as the ECQ or the quarantine dragged on, there is now I think there is now a requirement to consider as well how your customers contact you, because it's not always a virtual meeting. You still have customers who contact you via landline. And now that people aren't all working in the office, the next question is how do I now extend my corporate landline to my workers who are actually at home? Initially, when we started the quarantine, some of us had to give up or give out our personal cell phone numbers or our home office numbers so that our customers can contact us. But this is not a viable solution in the long term. So with Webex calling, it can work, for example, with your current PSTN or with your current call manager, so that you can extend at least the people working at home can have their own local corporate number, and it's all cloud-based, so that it's very easy for us to deploy, and it will still work with your current, we can integrate it with your current call manager so that it's still the same number. It just gets routed from your call manager to the Webex cloud to the person's soft phone. So that, but it's still to the customer. It's transparent. It's the same corporate number I dialed. So me as an employee, I don't have to give up my personal data, so that just so my customers can reach out to me. And then everything is simple to set up. So as I mentioned, just like Meraki has its own dashboard, Webex also has its own dashboard, and in it, now we can actually set up not just the meetings platform or the Teams platform, but also all of the devices. Diba? And so it's our one-stop shop, for the entire configuration of the Webex platform. And then it interoperates with the different tools. So if you're using Google Calendar, Office 365, iOS, or different messaging apps, as well as different LMSs or other applications. So we also can embed Webex, for example, in cars or in your Apple phone. And then I just wanted to highlight that these are all of the Webex devices that we have. So whether it's phones, headsets, or video endpoints, we have different tools for you. And then lastly, whatever solution you choose, it has to be secure. Your meetings have to be encrypted. What happens if your device gets stolen? Can you erase the content, and so on? So we want to assure our customers that Webex is very secure, and also that whatever information we get, we don't sell. So we don't actually sell your private data to third-party vendors, and we don't even share it to third-party vendors. So we're committed to privacy of data. We have documents for that. So if you want to know what information we capture and how we use it, it's all documented for us. And then lastly, we also have we've always adhered to compliance to security certifications, and these are some of them. If you want some of this information, you can request it. Some of them are protected by NDA, so you'll need an NDA with Cisco in order to get that information if you need to review it. And then I want to end now with some offers that we have in the market, and these you can talk to Phil Data for. So one, if you're planning to re-outfit your office, you can actually go to projectworkplace.cisco.com. And there, you can see it's a public website for you to actually help you envision how the workspace looks like. So there are huddle spaces, small meeting rooms, and so on. It goes into not just showing you what it looks like, but also the design considerations, the physical layout, the distance that the endpoint has to be from the table, and so on. Even the wiring diagram for the microphones, it's there. So to help you if you have to redesign your office. Similarly, for customers who haven't purchased any video endpoint from Cisco, we have a promo. You can buy 3 endpoints for the price of 2. This is only until July 24, so there are still a few weeks left. So if you're looking at providing endpoints for your for your employees, this is something that you can actually use. And then we also have a small stay connected from home bundle. So this is also something that you can reach out to. So specific to collaboration, this is Webex plus either a DX80 or a RoomKit Mini, and then it also includes a Meraki MX. So I'll end here. Now, if there are any specific questions, I'll start reviewing the chat.